My daughter forgot to hang up the phone. I heard her say, "She needs to go to a nursing home. She's too old to live alone in that penthouse." I didn't say anything, but something broke inside me. I sold the apartment for $2.1 million. They came back from vacation, happy and excited, but a surprise was waiting. Their keys wouldn't open the door. They found a white envelope on the doormat, and after reading it, they started screaming. Then I knew they wouldn't give up easily. This was just the beginning. Before we continue, let me thank you for watching Grandma's Voice. Please subscribe and tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We might give you a special shout out in our next video. Today's special mention goes to Sarah Mitchell from Denver, Colorado. Thank you for being part of our family. Now, let me tell you everything. The phone rang while I was preparing lunch in my penthouse kitchen, my homemade soup recipe, though it never tasted right without my late husband's stories at the table. I saw Emma's name and smiled, despite feeling lonely. "Mom, how are you doing today?" Her voice sounded warm, like when she was little. I sat in my favorite chair by the window, the one overlooking Central Park that Richard had positioned perfectly for the morning light. "Oh, you know me, sweetheart. Just finished lunch and was reading my book. The view is so beautiful today." I didn't mention I'd been staring at Richard's portrait for an hour, missing his laugh. "Are you eating enough? You know I can bring groceries over, right? You showed me how to use that grocery delivery app." "I'm eating plenty," I said softly, though I'd had a small incident yesterday. I left the iron on and almost burned my blouse. Thank goodness I smelled the smoke from the living room. There was silence. I could picture her making that worried face like her father used to. "Mom, maybe we should talk about getting someone to check on you more often." "Emma, I'm fine, really. How was your trip to the Bahamas? You and David at the resort, right?" "Yes, we just got back from Nassau. David's been handling the resort meetings while I sat through boring presentations about timeshare investments." She laughed, but it sounded forced. "Listen, Mom, I should probably go. David and I have dinner plans with some important investors." "Of course, sweetheart. I love you." "Love you too, Mom. Take care of yourself, okay?" I heard a click, then rustling sounds. She must have dropped the phone in her purse, I thought, reaching to hang up. But then I heard voices, quiet but clear through her phone. "Emma, you see how she's getting worse." David's voice, no longer sweet and caring. "She almost started a fire yesterday. What if she burns the whole building down?" My hand froze on the phone. Ice spread through my chest. "It's time for assisted living, Emma. She's becoming a liability, and you know it. Your mom's nice, but she can't live alone in $1 million penthouse anymore." "The penthouse is worth over $2 million now. With the park view and all that square footage, we could probably get $2.1 million, maybe more." "Exactly." David sounded pleased. "We could sell it, put her somewhere decent but affordable, and finally buy that house in the Hamptons we've been wanting, the one with the pool and tennis court." My daughter actually laughed. "God, David, you should have seen her today. So grateful just to hear from us. She has no idea we're planning this. The longer we wait, the more confused she'll get. We should act while she still trusts us completely." The phone slipped from my shaking hands, crashing onto the marble floor Richard and I had chosen together 15 years ago. Every tile selected, with thoughts of the life we'd build in this place we'd worked so hard to afford. I sat in the sudden quiet of my empty apartment, staring at Richard's photograph on the side table. His eyes seemed to look into mine with an expression I couldn't understand. sadness, warning, or maybe just the terrible knowledge that comes to those who have already left this world. The antique grandfather clock in the hallway, Richard's gift to me on our 30th anniversary, ticked steadily in the growing silence. Outside, the first evening lights began to twinkle in the park Richard had loved to walk in every morning. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, replacing the warmth I'd felt hearing my daughter's voice just moments ago. My hands, soft from years of volunteer work and tending to Richard during his illness, slowly curled into fists. They thought I was a liability. They thought I was confused, helpless, ready to be managed and thrown away. They were already spending my money, already planning their new life over my grave. But I wasn't dead yet, and I wasn't nearly as confused as they believed. I don't know how long I sat there in the dark, Richard's face watching me from the silver frame on the windowsill. The apartment felt different now, as if the walls themselves had heard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath. My legs felt wobbly when I finally stood to turn on the lights. The warm glow fell across the living room we decorated piece by piece, each item chosen with care and saved for with hard work. The silk curtains where Emma used to hide playing peekaboo, the grand piano Richard had bought when Emma showed interest in music lessons. I walked to the study and opened the drawer where I kept old bills and papers. My fingers found the folder I was looking for without thinking. 25 years of financial records I'd never thrown away because Richard always said, "You never know when you might need them." Columbia University bills, $180,000 over 6 years. I remembered those long days working extra shifts at the hospital, my feet aching from 12-hour shifts in the ICU. Richard would have dinner ready and would massage my shoulders while I paid bills at this very desk. "Margaret, you're working yourself to death," he'd said one night, watching me figure out how to pay for Emma's medical school tuition. "She deserves the best education we can give her, Richard. She's smart enough to be anything she wants." Richard had kissed the top of my head. "Just don't give her so much that she forgets to say thank you." I should have listened. God, I should have listened. The wedding bills were in there too. $85,000 for one day. I told Emma we could contribute $15,000, maybe $20,000 if we stretched. But Emma had actually cried, big tearful sobs about wanting her dream wedding in the Hamptons. I'd worked overtime for 10 months, coming home exhausted and sore. "Mom, you're the best mother in the world," she whispered during our dance, her head on my shoulder, her designer dress rustling against my simple gown. "I'll never forget this sacrifice." But she had forgotten. Just like she'd forgotten who helped her and David buy their first apartment when they had no money. Just like she'd forgotten who paid for the IVF treatments when they were trying to have children. Just like she'd forgotten who supported them through David's failed business ventures. I found the bank statements from 2 years ago, after Emma's miscarriage. They'd moved in with me for 6 months, just until we get back on our feet emotionally and financially. I'd never asked for rent money. I'd paid for everything. Groceries, utilities, even their therapy sessions. Emma would hug me and call me the most generous woman in New York. David would pat my arm and say, "Margaret, we'll pay you back when we're stable again."
They'd been stable for over a year now, both working high-paying jobs, both making more money than Richard and I ever had. But they'd never talked about moving out, never mentioned paying me back. The expensive dinners I'd paid for countless times, the vacation to Italy I'd funded because Emma needed to heal after the miscarriage, the new car I'd helped them buy when David's lease was up. "Margaret's like a mother to me," Emma had told her friends at their last dinner party, her arm around my shoulders. "I'm so lucky to have married into this family." I'd been proud, actually proud, to be the generous mother-in-law, the woman who took care of her family no matter what it cost me. I walked to my bedroom, still decorated the same way Richard and I had chosen together. His reading glasses sat on the nightstand, his favorite book still marked where he'd stopped reading on the day he died. I opened the safe where I kept our important papers and pulled out the deed to the penthouse. Margaret and Richard Sullivan, purchased 2008. No cosigners, no complications. My name only now that Richard was gone. Standing there in the bedroom where Richard had spent his last days, surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt something change inside me. The hurt was still there, sharp as broken glass, but underneath it, something harder was forming. They wanted to put me away and sell my life's work. They thought I was too old, too confused, too grateful for their attention to fight back. I looked at Richard's photo on the nightstand, remembering his voice from all those years ago. "Don't give her so much that she forgets to say thank you." Well, Richard, our daughter had definitely forgotten, but she was about to remember that her old mom wasn't as helpless as she thought. I walked to my home office and pulled out the business card I'd kept in my desk drawer for 3 years. Linda Martinez, real estate attorney. Richard had insisted we meet with her after his heart attack just to make sure our papers were in order. It was time for another meeting. The next morning, I walked through my penthouse like a stranger seeing it for the first time. But instead of seeing home, I was seeing what Emma and David saw: square footage, market value, liquid assets. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the marble countertop Richard had insisted on, working overtime himself to afford it because I'd fallen in love with the pattern. I'd made breakfast on this counter every morning for 15 years until the arthritis made standing for long periods difficult. I remembered the Christmas morning when 3-year-old Emma had taken her first steps right here, from the refrigerator to Richard's open arms. We'd both cried with joy, Richard scooping our baby up and spinning her around while I grabbed for the camera. "Our baby is walking in our apartment," Richard had whispered, tears streaming down his face, "in the home we built for her." The living room held 20 years of Christmas mornings. I could still see 8-year-old Emma's face lighting up at the sight of the dollhouse Richard had spent 4 months building in the basement, working in secret after Emma had gone to bed. I'd sewn tiny curtains for the windows, made miniature furniture from craft supplies. "Mom, it's just like a real house," Emma had squealed. And it was. Richard had made it perfect, down to the tiny doorbell that actually rang. That dollhouse had cost us 6 months of overtime. I'd seen it in a catalog and fallen in love with the idea of Emma playing with it on rainy afternoons. I climbed the stairs to Emma's old room, still painted the soft pink she'd chosen for her 16th birthday, still decorated with photos of her high school friends and college memories. The room where I'd rocked her through feverish nights as a baby, where Richard and I had helped her with homework at the desk Richard had custom built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Richard's side of the bed still had his water glass on the nightstand, his bookmark still marking page 203 of the mystery he'd never finish. I'd organized these closets with my own hands, custom arranged to fit Richard's height perfectly. His clothes still hung there, still smelling faintly of his cologne. This was the room where we planned our future, where we whispered about our dreams for Emma, where Richard died holding my hand while monitors beeped around us. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," he'd said near the end, his voice barely a whisper. "You're too good, Margaret, too giving. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." I'd promised, but I hadn't kept that promise, had I? In my home office, I found the folder of renovation photos Richard had kept, pictures of us moving in during the spring of 2008, 15 years younger and 20 pounds lighter, me and Richard installing the custom shelving, Richard in his work clothes bringing me coffee on long weekend days of unpacking. The financial records from those years told the story Richard's photos couldn't. Second mortgage to afford the down payment, Richard taking a part-time consulting job to help with monthly payments. We'd eaten simple meals for months, driven cars held together with hope and careful maintenance. But we'd made this apartment a home with our sweat, our sacrifice, our love for each other and for the family we were creating. And now my daughter, the baby who'd taken her first steps in this kitchen, the child who'd played in the living room I decorated by hand, wanted to sell it all and put me away like an old piece of furniture. I picked up Linda Martinez's business card from my desk drawer. The edges were worn from 3 years of handling, but the phone number was still clear. Emma and David thought they were dealing with a confused old woman who'd be grateful for any crumb of attention they threw her. They thought I was weak, helpless, ready to hand over my life's work without a fight. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. I dialed Linda's number and listened to it ring, my hands steady as stone. Outside, the autumn morning was bright and clear, the kind of day Richard used to love, the kind of day for new beginnings. The law offices of Martinez and Partners occupied the 20th floor of a prestigious building on Fifth Avenue, the kind of place that helps successful people with real problems, not just impressive corporate clients. I'd chosen my best dress, the navy blue one Richard had bought me for our anniversary, and arrived 20 minutes early, my hands only slightly shaking as I signed in at the reception desk. Linda Martinez was older than I'd expected, maybe 58, with gray hair and the patient smile of a woman who'd heard every family story twice. Her office was lined with legal books and family photos, husband, 2 grown children, a golden retriever, the kind of normal life Richard and I had tried to build. "Mrs. Sullivan, good to see you again." She poured coffee from a silver service in the corner, the rich aroma filling the space between legal documents and filing cabinets. "I remembered you and Richard from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you." I accepted the coffee, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I need to discuss something difficult about my daughter and son-in-law." Linda settled behind her desk, legal pad ready. "I'm listening." I told her everything. The phone call, the overheard conversation, their plans to sell my apartment and put me in assisted living. Linda's face never changed, but I caught her shaking her head slightly when I described their excitement about spending my money on their Hampton house.
"Unfortunately, Mrs. Sullivan, this situation is more common than you'd think." Linda set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. "Adult children often assume they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when valuable property is involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they? I mean, legally. Let's start with the basics. The apartment is titled in your name only since your husband's passing, correct?" "That's right. Richard and I owned it together, but when he died, it transferred to me automatically. Then, legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They cannot sell it, cannot force you into a care facility, cannot make any decisions about your assets without your clear, documented permission." Linda pulled a fresh legal pad from her drawer and began making notes. "The apartment belongs to you. Period." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by something sharper. "So, if I wanted to sell it myself, I could. You could put it on the market tomorrow if you chose to. It's your property, your decision." Linda looked up from her notes. "May I ask why you're considering that option?" I thought about David's calculating tone when he'd called me a liability, about Emma's laugh when she discussed my supposed confusion, about 30 years of sacrifice reduced to a real estate transaction. They think I'm helpless, confused. They think they can manage me like a piece of property. My hands clenched around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I showed them exactly how sharp my mind really is.
Linda was quiet for a moment, studying my face. The luxury real estate market is incredibly strong right now, especially in your area. Penthouses are selling within days, often for cash offers above asking price. She paused. If you were serious about selling quickly, before your daughter and son-in-law returned from their trip, how quickly could it happen? With the right buyer, and there are plenty of investors looking for properties like yours, we could have a sale completed within a week, maybe less. Linda leaned forward. But Mrs. Sullivan, this is a major decision. Once you sell, there's no going back. I built this life with my husband, Mrs. Martinez. Every room, every detail, every custom touch. I know exactly what I'm doing. We spent the next 2 hours discussing details, market value, cash buyer networks, legal requirements. Linda explained that she could have everything prepared within 24 hours if I was serious about moving forward. My consultation fee is $200, Mrs. Martinez said as I prepared to leave. If you decide to move forward, that applies toward my legal fees for the sale. I paid in cash, feeling more clear-headed than I had in months. Walking to my car in the autumn sunshine, I felt my phone buzz in my purse. Emma's name appeared on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I smiled. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. I could picture her in some resort room in Nassau, probably checking her watch, wondering why her grateful old mother wasn't jumping to answer her call. Let her wonder. Let her and David make their plans about my future, my apartment, my life. They were in for the surprise of their lives. The phone kept ringing as I climbed into my car, Linda Martinez's business card secure in my wallet, and a plan forming in my mind that would teach my ungrateful daughter exactly who she was dealing with. I had built my life from nothing once before. I could certainly tear it down and rebuild it on my own terms. The phone finally stopped ringing, but I knew she'd call back. She always did when she needed to check on her investment. Her mother. This time she was going to get much more than she bargained for. By the time I reached my building's parking garage, confidence had replaced the shake in my hands. Linda Martinez's words echoed in my mind. It's your property, your decision. 30 years of doubt and second-guessing had lifted like morning fog in the autumn sun. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the hallway, I could see it buzzing against the kitchen counter where I had left it. Emma's name glowed on the screen, and for the first time since her betrayal, I genuinely smiled. Let her worry for a moment. Let her wonder why her grateful old mother wasn't scrambling to answer her call. I poured myself a glass of water, took a deep breath, and picked up on the 7th ring. There you are, Mom. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier. Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands. I kept my tone warm, motherly. How's Nassau treating you? Oh, you know how these business trips are. But listen, I have the most wonderful news. She paused for dramatic effect. David and I have been planning something very special for you. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles going white. Oh? What kind of special? We want to treat you to a change of scenery. You deserve some peace and relaxation after everything you've been through since Dad died. Her voice carried that practiced sympathy I now recognize as manipulation. There's this beautiful place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything. A resort with medical staff. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. That sounds lovely, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to such trouble for me. Nonsense, Mom. You're family. David's voice came through in the background. He must have been listening on speakerphone. We've already made all the arrangements. When were you thinking? I managed, knowing full well they wanted me gone before they returned to claim their inheritance. Well, we should be back by next Thursday. We were hoping you could be ready by then. just pack some clothes and personal items. You know, the essentials. The essentials. Not the photo albums Richard had lovingly arranged, not the furniture Richard had chosen with such care, just the essentials for an old woman being shuffled off to die. Actually, Emma, I have a surprise for you too when you get back. Oh, what kind of surprise? I walked to the window Richard had positioned perfectly for me, looking out at the park where we'd spent countless evenings watching joggers and dog walkers. It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised. You're so sweet, Mom. We'll talk about everything when we get home, Hokadi. Get some rest and we'll take care of everything else. She called me sweet while planning to steal my life. I will, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Mom. See you Thursday. The line went dead, and I set the phone down with hands steadier than they had been in weeks. I walked to my home office and opened my laptop, the screen glowing to life with possibilities I'd never considered before. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a moment before I typed, "Luxury Real Estate Agents, Manhattan." The search results filled my screen like ammunition in a war I was finally ready to fight. I'd always been methodical. 25 years as a head nurse taught me to research thoroughly before making any decision. Tonight, that careful nature would serve a different purpose. I clicked through agent profiles, comparing success rates and client reviews like I used to compare medical suppliers. Upper East Side, Soho, Tribeca, neighborhoods where penthouses sold for the kind of money Emma and David were already spending in their dreams.
One name kept appearing in the top results. Patricia Chen, 42 years old, specialized in luxury quick sales, averaged 12 days from listing to closing. Her photo showed a professional smile and confident eyes, the kind of woman who could make things happen fast. Her reviews were exactly what I needed to see. Patricia sold our penthouse in 6 days. Cash buyer lined up within 48 hours. Smooth closing, no complications. Incredible service. Patricia understood we needed to sell quickly and delivered beyond our expectations. I stared at her direct phone number, prominently displayed beneath her credentials. This was it. The moment that would set everything in motion. Once I made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, manageable old woman my daughter expected. Richard's photo on my desk seemed to be watching me. I could almost hear his voice. "Margaret, are you sure about this?" I was sure. More sure than I'd been about anything since his funeral. I dialed Patricia Chen's number with steady fingers. "Patricia Chen, Luxury Manhattan Real Estate. How can I help you?" "Miss Chen, my name is Margaret Sullivan. I'm interested in selling my penthouse quickly. How fast can these things actually happen?" "Well, Mrs. Sullivan, that depends on several factors, but with the right property and pricing strategy, I've closed deals in as little as 10 days with cash buyers. What kind of timeline are you looking at?" 10 days? My heart hammered against my ribs. 10 days? That fast? Absolutely. The luxury market is incredibly hot right now, especially for well-maintained properties in prime locations. Can you tell me a bit about your penthouse? I looked around my living room, seeing it through a buyer's eyes for the first time. Upper East Side, 3,200 square feet, built in 2008. Park view, 3 bedrooms, 3 baths. I've maintained it impeccably. Did most of the decorating myself over the years. Patricia's voice sharpened with interest. That sounds exactly like what several of my high-end investors are looking for. Original owner, well-maintained, prime location, park views. Those are premium selling points in today's market. Would you be interested in a property assessment? How quickly could you come by? I can be there this afternoon if you're available, say 3 p.m. I glanced at the clock. It was just past noon. 3 works perfectly. Let me give you the address. After I hung up, I sat in the sudden quiet of my living room. the magnitude of what I'd set in motion beginning to settle in my chest. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the penthouse Richard and I had built together, assigning dollar values to our memories. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning obsessively, old habits from my nursing days when everything had to be perfect for inspections. I dusted every surface, straightened the throw pillows on the sofa, made sure every room gleamed. But this cleaning felt different. I wasn't preparing for guests. I was preparing for an execution. At exactly 3 p.m., the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, took a deep breath that carried the scent of Richard's roses on the terrace, still blooming in their planters, and walked toward the front door. My hand trembled slightly as it closed around the brass handle Richard had chosen himself 10 years ago. Beyond this door waited either my salvation or my damnation. I turned the handle and opened the door to my future. Patricia Chen looked exactly like her photo, professional but approachable, early 40s with the kind of confident bearing that came from years of successful deals. She carried a leather portfolio and tablet, and the moment she stepped inside, her eyes went wide. Wow! She stopped in my entryway, her gaze traveling up the coffered ceiling Richard had insisted on to the polished marble floors we'd selected together. Her appreciation was genuine, professional. You weren't kidding about maintaining this place. She pulled out her tablet and started taking photos. These floors throughout. Original? We installed them ourselves in 2009. Richard wanted something that would last, so we went with Italian Carrara marble. I found myself falling into the familiar rhythm of discussing our work, proud despite everything that was happening. And this kitchen, Patricia stopped at the marble island, running her hand along the edge. Custom installation? Every detail. I picked the pattern, said it reminded me of storm clouds over the ocean. Richard spent 6 weekends getting the measurements perfect. Patricia was typing notes on her tablet, photographing the custom cabinets, testing fixtures with the thoroughness of someone who knew what buyers wanted. Mrs. Sullivan, I have to be honest with you. In my 15 years doing this, I rarely see properties maintained to this standard. I'm a retired nurse, was a head nurse. I believe in keeping things clean and organized. It shows. She gestured toward the living room. May I? I nodded, following her as she admired the open-plan layout, the built-in entertainment center flanking the fireplace, the way my decorating choices had turned our investment into a home. This window seat, custom work. Richard built it for our daughter. She wanted a place to read her books and watch the park. I could picture Emma there with her fairy tale books and afternoon snacks, her reading glasses too big for her little face. Patricia was taking measurements now, her excitement barely contained. Mrs. Sullivan, I need to show you some comparable sales. She pulled up listings on her tablet. Similar properties in this area have been selling for $1.8 million to $2.0 million. My chest tightened. That was less than Emma and David had estimated in their cruel conversation. But given the condition, custom features, and prime park-facing location of your penthouse, I'm thinking we price it at $2.1 million. That should move it quickly while getting you top dollar. $2.1 million? I sat down heavily in Richard's reading chair, the number spinning in my head. That much? Mrs. Sullivan, you're sitting on a gold mine. Penthouses like this don't come on the market often, especially not in this condition. Patricia's voice carried the confidence of someone who knew her business. I actually have an investment group that's been looking for exactly this type of property. What kind of investment group? They specialize in high-end rental properties in prime Manhattan locations. They pay cash, no financing contingencies, no repair negotiations. They can close in 10 business days. 10 business days? Emma and David would return from Nassau in 6 days, expecting to find their grateful, manageable mother ready to be shipped off to their resort. What's the catch? Why so fast? Patricia smiled. No catch. Cash means no loan delays, no appraisal contingencies that could kill the deal. They do their own inspections, but frankly, your penthouse is in better shape than most new construction. I see. I looked around the living room where Emma had taken her first steps, where Richard and I had hosted Christmas mornings and birthday parties and quiet Sunday afternoons, reading the Times together. When would I need to be out? Standard contract gives you 45 days after closing, but they're flexible if you need more time. The main thing is getting clear title and completing the paperwork.
I thought about David's voice on the phone calling me a liability. I thought about Emma's cold calculation reducing me to a burden to be managed. I thought about Richard's warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. Patricia's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine excitement. Excellent choice, Mrs. Sullivan. Let me call them right now. I watched her dial, heard her describe my property with the enthusiasm of someone who'd found buried treasure. Upper East Side penthouse, original owner, immaculate condition, custom features throughout, park views. She ended the call with a broad smile. They want to move forward immediately. I can have the initial contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sun was setting through my wall of windows, casting golden light across the room where I'd just agreed to sell 15 years of my life. But for the first time since that devastating phone call, I felt something that had been missing for too long. Control. How does 10 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air like smoke, and I realized Patricia was waiting for an answer that would change everything. The grandfather clock in the hallway, Richard's anniversary gift to me, ticked steadily in the silence. 10 a.m. sounds perfect. After Patricia left with promises of contracts and closing timelines, I stood alone in the penthouse that would soon belong to someone else. The evening light through my windows painted everything golden, like a photograph of a life I was about to leave behind. But it wasn't sadness I felt. It was anticipation. Patricia arrived the next morning with contracts, a notary, and coffee for everyone, the kind of professional efficiency I'd always respected. I read every line with the thoroughness that had made me a good head nurse, checking details the way I used to check patient charts. Sale price, $2.1 million. Cash purchase, closing date, 10 business days from signing. The notary, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, walked me through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough, and you can remain in the penthouse for 45 days after closing if needed. That's correct, Mrs. Sullivan, though most sellers prefer to move out sooner rather than later, just for peace of mind. Peace of mind? I almost laughed. The only peace of mind I'd have would come from seeing Emma and David's faces when they discovered what their liability had done. I signed my name with steady hands, and just like that, the process was in motion. The first 3 days passed in a blur of paperwork and inspections. The title company began their search through 15 years of records. The investors sent their team, a polite crew who admired Richard's workmanship and found nothing to complain about. "Your husband really knew what he was doing," one of them told me, assuming Richard was still around. "This electrical work, these custom built-ins, all top quality." Days 4 through 6, I became a woman with a secret mission. I researched apartments online, looking for something small but comfortable, somewhere I could start over with nearly $2.1 million in the bank. I found a place in Brooklyn Heights, a senior community with waterfront views and a library, the kind of place Richard and I had sometimes talked about for our golden years, when we wanted to simplify our lives. I also called storage facilities, planning which of Richard's things I'd keep and which I'd have to leave for the new owners. His books, definitely. His favorite coffee mug. The photo albums. The essentials of a life lived together. Days 7 through 9 brought a strange confidence I hadn't felt in years.
Each morning, I woke up knowing I was one step closer to freedom, one step closer to showing my daughter that her confused old mother was sharper than she had ever imagined. Mrs. Henderson from across the hall noticed the activity, asked about the inspectors and official-looking people coming and going. "Just some maintenance being done," I told her, hating the half-truth, but knowing the full truth would spread through the building before I was ready. On day 8, Patricia called with final confirmation. "Everything's on track for tomorrow's closing, Mrs. Sullivan. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection results. Wire transfer will be completed the same day. You'll have access to funds immediately." That night, I packed a single suitcase with clothes and personal items, not because I was moving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Richard's photo on our dresser and whispered, "I hope you understand what I'm doing." Thursday morning arrived bright and clear, the kind of autumn day Richard used to say was Manhattan at its finest. I dressed carefully in my best outfit, not the funeral dress, but the emerald green one Richard had bought me for our last anniversary together. The title company office was all professional efficiency and congratulations. The buyers were represented by their lawyer, a sharp woman who double-checked every document. Patricia handled the paperwork like a conductor leading an orchestra. "Mrs. Sullivan, if you'll sign here, initial there." Each signature felt like cutting a chain. The deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that penthouse 24A no longer belonged to Margaret Sullivan. "And this is your wire transfer confirmation. $2.1 million less closing costs has been deposited to your account." I stared at the numbers on the paper. More money than I had ever seen in one place. More money than Emma and David had dreamed their liability could access. We shook hands all around, everyone pleased with the smooth transaction. Patricia walked me to the elevator, promising to stay in touch if I ever needed real estate services again. "You made the right choice, Mrs. Sullivan. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need." I drove home through neighborhoods I'd known for 15 years, past the hospital where I had worked, past the park where Richard and I used to walk every Sunday morning. But instead of nostalgia, I felt liberation. I pulled into my building's garage and sat in my car, looking up at the windows of the penthouse that no longer belonged to me. The keys felt heavy in my palm, but tomorrow I'd hand them over to the new owners and walk away from this chapter of my life. Emma and David were due back from Nassau in 2 days. They'd arrive expecting to find their grateful, manageable mother ready to be packed off to their resort. Instead, they were going to find an empty apartment and a lesson they'd never forget. I climbed out of my car and walked toward the elevator, reaching for my phone to make the next call in a plan that was working better than I'd ever hoped. The elevator ride to the 24th floor felt longer than usual. I stood alone in the mirrored car looking at my reflection, a 72-year-old woman who had just sold her home to teach her daughter a lesson about respect. But I couldn't bring myself to go inside immediately. I sat in the hallway outside my door, staring at the brass nameplate that read, "The Sullivans," a name that now belonged to history. Finally, I unlocked the door and stepped into the penthouse for what might be the last time as its owner. The silence felt different now, expectant. I walked to the kitchen and called directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. "AAA emergency locksmith, this is Carlos speaking." "I need all my door locks changed today. It's urgent." "What kind of time frame are we looking at, ma'am?" "As soon as possible. I can pay cash." "I can be there in 2 hours. Address?"
Back in the apartment, I waited for Carlos while packing more systematically. This wasn't just about the essentials anymore. This was about taking everything that mattered and leaving nothing that Emma and David could claim. Carlos arrived right on schedule, a man in his 50s who'd clearly seen every kind of lock emergency New York had to offer. "Security issue, ma'am?" he asked, studying my front door. "New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry." He nodded like he'd heard her before and got to work. I watched him remove the locks Richard had chosen 15 years ago, the brushed steel hardware I'd picked because it matched our door handles. "These are quality locks," Carlos commented as he worked. "Somebody knew what they were doing when they installed them." That was my husband. He liked things done right. The new locks were different, more modern, more secure. They clicked differently when Carlos tested them, a sharper, more mechanical sound than the old ones. "Here's your new keys, ma'am. 4 copies of each, front door and service entrance." Carlos handed me a ring of keys that felt foreign in my palm. "That'll be $480 with the emergency fee." I paid in cash from my wallet, knowing there would be no paper trail connecting Margaret Sullivan to this transaction. After Carlos left, I stood in my apartment and began the hardest part, deciding what to take and what to leave. The furniture that told our story would have to stay. The photo albums chronicling Emma's childhood would come with me. Richard's clothes, still hanging in our closet, still carrying the faint scent of his cologne, those would have to stay. While I packed, I called Riverside Gardens Senior Community on my phone, explaining that I needed a furnished 2-bedroom immediately. "We have a lovely unit available for immediate occupancy, month-to-month lease if you prefer flexibility." "I'll take it." I met Mrs. Davis at the complex 2 hours later, a modern but warm building designed for active seniors with a community garden and well-maintained common areas. The 2-bedroom unit was simple but comfortable, furnished with everything I needed to start over. "Cash deposit is perfectly fine, Mrs. Sullivan. When would you like to move in?" "Tonight." Mrs. Davis's eyebrows rose slightly, but she didn't ask questions. I signed the lease and handed over first month rent plus deposit, nearly $4,200 that would have seemed impossible to spend casually just 2 weeks ago. Loading my car in the gathering dusk, I felt the weight of 15 years of memories in every box, but also the lightness of freedom. I took one last walk through the empty rooms, my footsteps echoing differently now that the penthouse belonged to someone else. In the kitchen where Richard had taught Emma to make pancakes on Saturday mornings. In the living room where we'd watched Emma open presents on Christmas morning. In our bedroom where Richard had taken his last breath while I held his hand. "I'm sorry, honey, but you'd understand. You always said I was too generous for my own good." I locked the new locks and left the building for what might be the last time, my rearview mirror full of the life I was leaving behind. The sun was setting when I arrived at Riverside Gardens, my car loaded with the essentials of my existence. I carried my suitcase to my new front door, fumbling with unfamiliar keys to unfamiliar locks. Inside the small apartment, I dropped my suitcase and immediately reached for my phone. The final phase of my plan required one more purchase, one more piece of the puzzle that would give Emma and David the surprise of their lives. The apartment felt like a hotel room, functional but soulless, with generic furniture and the lingering smell of industrial carpet cleaner. I stood holding my phone, Richard's photo already positioned on the nightstand, trying to decide which security company would best capture the moment of truth. I opened my laptop on the small dining table and began researching surveillance equipment. After an hour of comparison shopping, I found what I needed: a wireless security camera disguised as a smoke detector, with smartphone app control and crystal clear video quality. Most importantly, it could stream live footage directly to my phone from anywhere with internet access. I ordered it with same-day delivery, paying the extra $50 to guarantee arrival within 4 hours. The total cost was $180, an amount that wouldn't even register in my new financial reality. With the camera ordered, I turned to the next crucial element: the note that would explain everything to Emma and David when they discovered their keys no longer worked. The first draft was too angry, too raw with the pain of their betrayal. The second was too cold, missing the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third draft, I found the right tone: dignified but devastating, loving but final. I wrote in my careful nurse's handwriting, the handwriting Richard had always admired. "Dear Emma and David, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered that your keys no longer work. That's because I heard your phone conversation about putting me in assisted living, because I'm becoming a liability.
I heard you calculating how much money you'd make selling my penthouse, the home your father and I built with love and sacrifice. The penthouse has been sold for $2.1 million cash. The money is safely in my new bank account where it will stay. I've moved to a place where I'm valued, not just tolerated. Don't worry about me. I'm finally free to live my life on my own terms. Your belongings have been packed and are being stored at Manhattan Storage Solutions on East 84th Street. You have 30 days to claim them before storage fees begin. I gave you everything I had for 30 years. You repaid me by planning to warehouse me so you could steal my life's work. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. With love and disappointment, Mom. Friday evening, the delivery truck arrived at my apartment with a small box containing my surveillance equipment. I spent 2 hours testing the device and learning the smartphone app. The video quality was remarkably clear, the audio sharp enough to catch whispered conversations. Saturday morning, I drove to my former building for the last time. I used the service entrance I'd never given Emma and David access to, taking the service elevator to avoid questions from neighbors. My hands shook slightly as I approached the penthouse door with my new keys. Inside, the apartment still smelled like home. Richard's cologne lingering in the closets, the lemon oil I used on the wood furniture, the faint residue of 15 years of family dinners. But there were new additions that made my chest tight. Emma and David's mail scattered on the kitchen counter, their dry cleaning hanging in my closet, evidence that they'd been treating my penthouse as their personal storage facility while planning my exile. I positioned the camera smoke detector in the entryway, angling it perfectly to capture anyone entering. The view through my phone app showed the entire hallway, including the spot where I planned to tape my note. I tested the motion detection, walking in and out of frame until I was satisfied the system would capture every moment of their return. Then I taped the envelope to the inside of the front door at eye level, where they couldn't possibly miss it. Standing in my living room one final time, I touched the mantel where Richard's photo had sat for 10 years. The new owners would put their own family photos there, create their own memories in the rooms Richard and I had filled with love. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered to Richard's memory. "Justice served."
I locked the penthouse with my new key, tested the camera feed one more time from the hallway, and took the service elevator down for the last time. The motion detector was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone ready to alert me the moment Emma and David discovered their keys no longer worked. Back in my apartment, I sat in my chair with my phone in my hand, watching the empty hallway through the camera app. The timestamp showed 2:15 p.m. Saturday afternoon. Monday, Emma and David would return from their business trip, probably discussing their assisted living plans and already spending my money in their minds. They had no idea their grateful old mother had become their worst nightmare. Sunday passed slowly. I explored my new neighborhood, found a coffee shop called Brooklyn Brew where the barista made excellent espresso, discovered a small park where other retirees fed pigeons and played chess. For the first time in years, I felt anonymous, free from the weight of being someone's burden. Monday morning, I woke with the anticipation of a woman about to witness justice after years of injustice. My coffee tasted better than it had in weeks, and even the small apartment felt less confining as I settled into my chair with my phone. The camera feed showed my empty former hallway, the brass door that no longer belonged to me. 3:30 p.m. They should arrive soon. I'd memorized their travel patterns from years of worried check-ins. Emma always insisted on leaving Nassau by noon to avoid customs delays, and David drove exactly the speed limit. They'd be pulling into the parking garage within an hour. I looked at Richard's photo on my nightstand. "I hope you're watching, honey. They're about to learn what happens when you underestimate your old mother." 4:15 p.m. My phone buzzed with motion detection. My heart hammered against my ribs as I watched the screen. Emma appeared first,
pulling her wheeled suitcase behind her. David emerged from the elevator a moment later, carrying their garment bags. They moved with the casual confidence of people coming home to claim their inheritance. I watched them approach the penthouse door, Emma fishing her keys from her designer purse while David set down the luggage. She inserted her key into the lock I'd had changed just 3 days ago. The key didn't turn. Emma frowned, examining her key ring. She tried again, jiggling the key with growing frustration. "That's weird." Her voice came through my phone speaker crystal clear. "My key isn't working." David stepped closer, his expression shifting from tired to concerned. "Let me try the service entrance." I watched him disappear around the corner while Emma continued struggling with the front lock. When David returned 5 minutes later, his face had darkened with alarm. "Service door's the same, completely different locks." His voice carried the edge of panic I'd hoped to hear. "Emma, someone changed these locks." "What? That's impossible. Mom doesn't even know any locksmiths." David studied the front door more carefully, his business mind recognizing trouble when he saw it. "These are brand new, professional installation. This isn't some accident." Emma pulled out her phone with shaking fingers. "I'm calling Mom." I watched her dial my old landline, the number I'd had disconnected 4 days ago. After several rings, her face crumpled with confusion. "No answer. It's not even going to voicemail." "Try her cell phone," David suggested. "She doesn't have a cell phone, remember? We kept talking about getting her one for emergencies." Her voice cracked with the first hint of real fear. David was examining the doorframe now, his earlier confidence completely evaporated. "We need to call building security. Someone has to have a master key." I watched them hurry to the elevator, probably heading to the concierge desk. This would be interesting, watching them explain to building management why they couldn't get into an apartment that was no longer owned by Margaret Sullivan. 20 minutes later, they returned with Jerry, the building's head of security, a man I'd known for 10 years. "I'm sorry, Mr. and Mrs. Davidson," Jerry was saying as they approached the door, "but according to our records, this unit was sold last week. New owners took possession on Thursday." Emma's face went white. "Sold? That's impossible. This is my mother's apartment." "Ma'am, I have the paperwork right here. Sale was completed Thursday morning. Mrs. Sullivan moved out Friday." David grabbed the papers from Jerry's hands, his travel agent mind trying to process what he was reading. "This has to be a mistake. Mrs. Sullivan would never sell without telling us." "Sir, I watched her pack her things myself. She seemed very clear about what she was doing." Emma was crying now, her careful makeup streaking down her cheeks. "Where did she go? Did she leave a forwarding address?" Jerry shook his head sympathetically. "She just said she was moving somewhere she'd be appreciated. Left this for you." He handed Emma a white envelope with my name written in my careful script. I leaned forward in my apartment chair, phone clutched in both hands as she tore open the seal with trembling fingers. Her eyes moved across my words, David reading over her shoulder. I watched their faces change, confusion to shock, to disbelief to horror. "She heard us," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible through my phone speaker. David snatched the note from her hands, reading it again as if the words might change. That manipulative old woman, she planned this whole thing. 2.1 million, Emma was sobbing now. She kept it all. That money was supposed to be our future. "Your future?" David snapped, his mask of devoted son-in-law finally slipping. "This is your mother, Emma. You should have handled this better." "My fault," she whirled on him, years of suppressed resentment boiling over. "You're the one who said she was becoming a liability. You're the one who pushed for the assisted living facility.
Well, she was a liability. Look what she's done to us. David gestured wildly around the hallway that no longer led to their inheritance. We're about to be homeless. Our lease expires next week, and we spent our savings on this Nassau trip because we thought we'd have her money to fall back on. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on me. They were fighting in front of my former home about being homeless, just as they'd planned to make me homeless in their assisted living facility. "Call a lawyer," Emma said desperately. "There has to be something we can do. She can't just sell the apartment without consulting us." "With what money?" David's voice dripped with contempt. "In case you forgot, we maxed out our credit cards on this trip thinking we'd pay them off with her money, and my commission checks won't start again until next month." I watched my daughter's face crumble as she realized the full scope of their situation. No apartment, no inheritance, no savings, and David's financial irresponsibility finally revealed. "How could she be so cruel?" Emma whispered. "The same way she was cruel when you called her a liability and planned to warehouse her," David shot back. "The old woman was smarter than both of us." Jerry cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Folks, I need to ask you to move along. The new owners are moving in tomorrow, and they've requested that the hallway be kept clear." Through my phone screen, I watched them gather their luggage with the defeated movements of people who'd finally understood they'd been outplayed. Emma buried her face in her hands while David stared at my note with the expression of a man who'd underestimated his opponent completely. I turned off the camera feed. I'd seen enough.
Walking to my small kitchen, I opened the bottle of Richard's favorite wine I'd saved from the penthouse, a 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion that never came while he was alive. I poured myself a glass and raised it toward Richard's photo. "To you, my love, justice served." The wine tasted like victory. They'd learned what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you, when you mistake kindness for weakness, when you confuse generosity with stupidity. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, probably Emma trying to reach me through some new method. I deleted it without reading and powered off the phone completely. Walking to my window, I looked out at the Brooklyn Heights promenade, where couples walked hand in hand and families pushed strollers along the waterfront. Somewhere across the river, my daughter and her husband were facing the consequences of their cruelty. Somewhere in Manhattan, they were learning that their liability had become their biggest problem. For the first time in 3 years since Richard's death, I felt completely free. I was no longer anyone's burden. I was my own woman again, with my own money, my own choices, and my own future stretching ahead like an open road. Margaret Sullivan had left the building, and she was never coming back. The next morning, I woke up in my new apartment to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then I remembered and smiled. I was free. I made coffee in my tiny kitchen and checked my bank account on my phone. $2,087,000 after closing costs. More money than Richard and I had ever dreamed of having. For the first time in years, I could do anything I wanted, go anywhere, be anyone. I thought about Emma and David, probably sleeping in their car, begging friends for a couch to crash on. The thought should have made me sad. Emma was still my daughter after all. But instead, I felt only the satisfaction of a lesson well taught. They'd wanted to put me away because I was becoming inconvenient. They'd planned to profit from my supposed decline, to warehouse me while they spent my money on their dreams. Instead, they'd learned that their old mother was anything but helpless. And maybe, just maybe, they'd learned something about respect. I sipped my coffee and looked at Richard's photo,
now at home on my new nightstand. What do you think, Funny? Should I send them a postcard from my first vacation in 20 years? I could almost hear him laugh. After all these years, Margaret Sullivan was finally living her life on her own terms, and it felt absolutely wonderful.